Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. I am back once again, your host, Jeremy, as always, here to try to make the world seem a little more normal. Does it ever happen? God, no. But I am joined by guests, as always, to help me make the world seem a little more normal. And that guest tonight is Paul Joel, an author of a recently published novel, A Man Like You and Me, a supernatural adventure story. And we are here tonight to dive into his book and everything that led up to it as well, and just basically his beliefs in life. How you doing tonight, Paul?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And well, I'm gonna start this interview off like I start every interview off. What brought you down this supernatural, paranormal path you now live on?
Well, I never believed in God, mainly because my parents were Polish Jews during World War II. So everyone in my mother's family was murdered except for my mother, same with my father. And I never believed in this all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving God, because where was he when everyone was butchered in my family? And it was horrible. I mean, my mother was about 4 years old when the war started, and she lived in a large house because, in addition to her parents, she had a brother. She had three sisters who were married and had children who were all older than she was, and their husbands lived there too. And the Nazis came in, and for some reason they didn't see her. She was hiding someplace, but she could see and hear everything. And they tied up everybody. Then they murdered the children in front of everyone. Then they raped the women and slit their throats. Then they murdered the husbands, and finally they murdered her parents. And she eventually ran out of the house and lived on the street eating garbage for a couple of weeks until she was taken in by a Ukrainian family who hated Jews, but she hid the fact that she was Jewish. And that's how she kind of survived during the war. My father was much older. He was married and had an infant son. And he was in the Polish army. I sent you a picture of him in his Polish army uniform. And he came
Yes.
home one day during the war, and he found out that the Nazis murdered his wife and his infant son. So he deserted from the Polish army and ran for his life. And he had this fantastic immune system where he would not have survived. Try living for 3 different winters in the Russian winter, running from the Nazis, no shelter, sleep in the snow, sleep in the rain, always moving, steal some food, buy some food, work for a week, always moving. And I had his immune system. Uh, and it was like a gift from God. Like it was almost like I was never got sick. And um, then my parents came to the United States after the war, and my mother was way too young. And I don't know if she ever really loved my father because she couldn't get on the boat as a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old. She was, so she married him, and I thank every God that I was born later and missed that, and as an American, okay. And she was only 14 years older than me, so she was kind of clueless, how to be a mother. And when I was 4, she decided to take me away from my father, and instead of living in New Jersey, I grew up in Brooklyn, and she married somebody else who was very nice. But it was a terrible, terrible childhood because she was a child. Okay, during my childhood, um, she graduated from high school, graduated from college, got a master's in Russian literature, and then eventually took courses in education and became a kindergarten teacher. So she was always doing things, and I was kind of left alone. And then the worst part of it was my stepfather was overweight, which is like a heinous crime in my mother's eyes. So at one point, I'm 6 years old, and she says, "There's no food in the house. That's it. We're not having any food in the house. You can't eat at 2 o'clock in the morning." And I'm literally starving. Okay, and it was kind of like a very lonely, miserable childhood. And to top it all off, um, I'm 3 years old, okay, and I'm not saying any words. And you're supposed to be able to say 2 words with meaning by the age of 1. It's usually something from my dad down, okay. And I didn't have a pediatrician, so a neighbor said, "Hey, maybe he needs to see a pediatrician." And I have this great memory and this great immune system. So here I am, I'm 3, and I was seen by a female pediatrician who referred me to a male pediatric neurologist. And my parents were very worried that I was retarded, and I remember the look on their faces. And after examining me, this is a direct quote from 72 years ago. No, he's not retarded. He's aware of his environment. He'll learn to talk slow. He's very slow. And that was the upshot of this. And what he forgot to ask is anyone speaking English to this kid? How am I going to learn if there's no TV, there's no radio, and they're speaking Polish or Russian to me? But he didn't ask that question. So I was kind of labeled it as dumb. And then because they worked multiple jobs, even though they believed in God, they put me in this torture chamber called yeshiva, which at that time was for Jewish boys. Now they have Jewish girls too. And you get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and in the morning you learn how to read Hebrew, write Hebrew, you learn about the Old Testament, the history of the Jewish people. And then another person comes in and teaches you what you learned: text, reading, writing, arithmetic. So you're there from 8 in the morning till 5. And I'm in first grade, and I'm the dumbest kid in every subject. And I'm trying, and I'm very frustrated, and I've already been labeled dumb. And then we moved to a different part of Brooklyn, and now it's the same schedule, but I have to take a 6 mile bus ride to get there. So I'm really occupied. And again, I'm the dumbest kid in class. And this goes on for almost all of third grade till finally Mr. Frank Tanler, who is the person who taught public school in the afternoon, said he needed to talk to me. And I was worried because I knew I was getting for being dumb. And he said, look, I don't know what's going on with you, but when I call on you in class, you seem to have some idea what's happening. But when you take these tests, you're the worst student I've ever had in my entire teaching career. Don't you study for the test? I told the story that I was dumb, and I don't get home till 6, and there's Hebrew homework for me to do, and why should I waste my time studying? Years later, he announced that there's another test, and in a loud voice to embarrass the heck out of me, says, and you understand English, or is English a second language? I don't want to hear about your schedule. Study for the test. So I studied for the test and got an A. Who the heck knew? And then I started getting A's. And the other thing is I have dark hair, and all these teachers at yeshiva had dark hair too. And when I get the answer wrong, I get beaten with a ruler on my hand. So I got little scars on fingers and hand for this. And then I heard I was getting A's in fourth grade. So I heard there was this thing in public school called SP, Special Progress. You take a test in sixth grade, you do really well. You skip eighth grade, you go grade to ninth grade. And I wanted a shot at that. I mean, having one less year of school is like winning the lottery. And so I taught my way into public school, which is already a big success because now it was 9 to 3 and they don't hit you in public school. Another teacher in public school with dark hair, female, who hated the boys and loved the girls. So I get the answer wrong, and she'd say, this is a direct quote from fifth grade. Listen, you have to stop thinking with your penis and start using your brain for a change. And I was like mortified. I'm 10 years old, and my teacher's talking about my penis in class. And so finally, I got to sixth grade, and for the first time, I had a blonde teacher, Miss Hammer. And for the first time, nobody was hitting me, nobody was embarrassing me. I took the test for SP and did well and skipped eighth grade. And I think in the back of my head, I'm already like pre-programmed to think that blonde is wholesome, blonde is good. Okay, and then fast forward, so an intern at Kings County Hospital, Downstate Medical Center, and I have this genius, Dr. Howard Lyons, in charge of pulmonary lung disease, which is why I went into it. And he had a couple of rules. The most important rule was that he'd say, if you know the patient, you don't need the chart. So there's a hierarchy in medicine. The lowest is the intern, then the resident, then the fellow, then the attending. And usually the lowest person reads the note and presents the case and they discuss it. So I'd be an intern and be up all night and have 3 or 4 admissions. And then at morning report, I'd hand him the charts. And I was the only one who could actually present from memory like this. The others would cheat and say the labs are normal except for this, this, and this, but I gave him everything. And because I was a pretty good intern resident, I got a letter of reference from this great physician, and I got to do a pulmonary fellowship at Mass General Harvard. So I get there, the first day, this was 1978, July 1st, and there's 8 patients on the pulmonary service being followed by the pulmonary service throughout the hospital. So I get there 2 hours beforehand thinking I should memorize this. I mean, they expected me to memorize this in Brooklyn, Downstate Medical Center, Kings County. This is Mass General, one of the most prestigious hospitals in the world, Harvard, Boston. So I get there, and then I meet the attending, Dr. Hales, and I walk over to the chart rack, and I hand him the chart. And he looks at me like I'm crazy and says, look, I don't know if you know what's going on here, but I'm your superior. You're supposed to be presenting the case to me, not the other way around. And I told him what Dr. Lyon said, and I said, this will save you time. You can go through the chart while I present and write your note now instead of coming back in and writing notes on these patients. So we do that, and then I hand the chart to the next one. He says, you know this too? I said, yeah, I know all they do. That's what I thought I was supposed to do. And here's the purpose of the story. So eventually we get to the ICU, and I had been there an hour or so beforehand, but there was a shift change. There's a different nurse. So Dr. Hales is on my right. He's got the chart. I'm looking straight ahead, and I'm presenting this complicated case. A patient on a ventilator with tubes coming out of every orifice. And as I'm presenting, I see the back of this nurse's head. And this was a new nurse who would come. There was a shift change since I saw the patient last. And I'm seeing this long blonde hair, and I'm tracing the long blonde hair as I present. And I remember thinking, okay, the width of her shoulders isn't wide. She's not fat. And then she turns around, and I see her face. And I stop. And I say to myself, oh, my God, this is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. What is this doing here in the middle of all this? And next thing I hear Dr. Hale say, listen, you want to tell me how this patient got on the ventilator? You know, we're pulmonary, that's what we're here for. And the next thought was, pulmonary, who cares about pulmonary? Look at this woman. So I'm not a ladies' man, I'm really shy. So, when you're working in the ICU as a nurse, you have gloves on. And I'm not going to ask anyone out if they're married or engaged and get shot down. Like, what do I need to get shot down for? So she lived near the hospital. I lived a few blocks further from the hospital. And I would kind of, make sure that I'd run into her as she was leaving around 5 or so and getting there in the morning. And after a couple of weeks, I looked and made sure she had no ring on, okay? And I had perfect vision then, okay? So eventually I asked her out, and we're having a nice dinner at one of the nice restaurants in Boston. And in walks Dr. Miller, who was a young attending in the same pulmonary department, who fancied himself as a ladies' man. He walks over to us and, we say hi. And the next day he comes over and says, how did you get her to go out with you? And I said, well, the usual way, I didn't kidnap her. I asked her out, and she said, yes, that's how it usually works, And then he tells me, well, I've been asking her out for weeks now, and she keeps turning me down. Didn't you see the huge engagement ring she had on her fingers? It's like $20,000 in 1978. It's huge. She's engaged to this cardiology fellow. So the next question in the story is, I didn't believe in God at the time. And number one, clearly, I was meant not to see this engagement ring, and I looked. And second, this is a religious Catholic person who went to Catholic High and goes to Mass every Sunday and believes in God and goes to Mass every feast day. How is she going out with me when she's engaged to somebody else? Like, how does that work? I don't think that's in the Bible. So this whole thing started like it was, kind of like supernormal, supernatural. So eventually, years later, I asked her to marry me, okay? And she said, well, I'll marry you, but only if you get baptized. And I was honest. I said, I don't believe in God. How's that going to work? Said, that's okay. We baptize infants, okay? Nobody's going to ask anything. I remember saying to myself, okay, I don't believe in any of this nonsense, but somebody's poured some water on my head and I get to marry the woman of my dreams, the deal of the century. So I was baptized on November 4th, 1981, and we were married in January 1982. And there really wasn't time for a honeymoon, so we planned this 6-week trip to Western Europe on a Eurail pass in October, and that's where the book starts, okay? And the other thing in the book is a couple of things that are different. She's not there in the beginning of the book, but of course, I'm not taking a 6-week vacation without my wife. And the other thing is, in the book, she doesn't believe in God, and I do, okay? So that's a little bit of a twist that's not right, okay? But the book is basically miracles that happened, okay? We're in Germany, of all places, and my trip to Germany before I met Mary Beth was I went there for one day to see a concentration camp, Dachau, the first concentration camp. And then I left within 24 hours. That was my visit to Germany. But when you're with Mary Beth, the whole world is different. Germany's gorgeous. And it's foolish for me to dislike Germans because the people who were adults when my parents were during World War II, they're dead in 1982. They're not around, okay? So it's crazy to dislike Germans because of what happened to my family. So anyway, true story. We're on a bus to see Neuschwanstein in Germany. It's this castle that Ludwig II built in the 1800s, and it's gorgeous. And it's the castle that Walt Disney used as a model for all of his castles in his movies and TV shows. And the bus stops in the middle of nowhere at a coffee shop. And everyone, including my wife, gets off the bus to go into the coffee shop. And obviously, the coffee shop paid the bus company to stop there, okay? And I didn't feel like I had to eat or drink or use the restroom. So across the street was this little church. And I didn't know the story of it, but sometimes it's nice to look at these churches. I didn't believe in God, of course. And the story was this: there was a stick figure of Jesus being scourged that they used to use in the Good Friday procession. But everyone agreed it was ugly, so they tossed it in the barn for a couple of decades until somebody realized there were actual tears coming from the eyes of Jesus from this thing. So they put this ugly thing on the altar and built this church. And I walk in there, and the church is beautiful. The ceilings, the walls are beautiful. And it's a Catholic church. There's stations to the cross on the walls. But your eye is drawn to this ugly thing. And there's nobody else in the church, just me. So I'm sitting there in the front row looking at this thing. And then I get this message: I love you. Your sins are forgiven. And I believe in God. Okay. And it wasn't like I heard a voice. It was as if I'm talking to you right now. Okay. You hear my voice and you're interpreting the English
Yep.
in my voice to understand what I'm saying. Okay. Well, this was like, the message was like right into my brain. I didn't hear anything. And I'm happy. I'm thrilled. I'm excited. And I tell my wife about this. And our plan was we had jeans and backpacks and sneakers. Our plan was to sleep on the train overnight to Vienna, and that was what we're going to do. But as we're checking out of this inexpensive hotel near the train station, I said, "Look, we have a Euro pass. We don't have to take the next train. Why don't we celebrate? Let's have a nice meal here someplace." So I asked the clerk as we're checking out, "What's one of the nicest restaurants around here?" And he said, "Oh, probably the restaurant, the Four Seasons Hotel." So I said to my wife, "Let's go there." And he says, "You can't get in there." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, it's a Friday night. Apparently October 15th, 1982 is a Friday. You need a reservation. It's a small restaurant. Plus, you can't get in there dressed like with sneakers and jeans and backpacks. You need a suit and she needs a gown." So I remember saying to my wife, let's go there. I mean, I just communicated with the creator of the universe. He'll take care of us. Okay. So we run over there, and there's a doorman with a top hat, and I ask him where the restaurant is, and he says up the second floor. And as I start to get in, he says, "Look, let me take your backpacks from you. Okay, I'll give you on your way back." Like basically, we don't allow people dressed with backpacks in our lobby, let alone eat here. So I go upstairs, and the maitre d' is in a tuxedo, the piano player is in a tuxedo, the waiters are in tuxedos, everyone is in a gown or a suit. And the waiter asks me my name, so I tell him my name, and there's one table that's empty with a reserve sign on it, and he takes the reserve sign off it, and he started eating. Now, my wife said she saw our last name on the reserve sign, but I didn't see that. Anyway, we're sitting there and having a wonderful meal, and the piano player is playing this song, so I asked the waiter if he knew the song. He said, "Yeah, it's called A Man Like You and Me by Michelle Jarry." And it starts off, it doesn't matter if you're powerful and a king, we're all slaves to our fate. Whether you're a king or a beggar, you're a slave to fate.
Yeah, I totally
You know.
agree.
And so the
I
book
said, well,
now,
great.
It's about a ball or something.
Yeah, right. You were like stuck on something from worse.
Go ahead. Okay, I'm listening.
yeah, the book is really about the interface between fate and free will. So that's part of what the whole thing's about. And so what I told you just now is the first chapter. The second chapter is we now get off the train. We're in Vienna, and it's dark now. It's time to eat again. And so we check into a hotel. And in Vienna, there's a rule: you can't have a building higher than St. Stephen's Cathedral, so you can see it from everywhere. So I said to my wife, "Let's look for a restaurant on the plaza there. I'm sure there's restaurants there." So we find one again on the second floor, and I open the door. It's like a wooden door, with a wooden frame with a glass door. And there's a tiny, light on the second floor. I walk up there, and clearly it's closed. So I turn around to leave, and now we're locked in this hallway. And again, I'm a pulmonary fellow from New York City, did training at Harvard. Since 1921, you can't lock people in, okay? In 1921, there was a fire in the Coconut Grove restaurant in Manhattan. And for some reason, the people couldn't get out, and they were burned alive. So if the place is closed at night and there are no people in there, you can lock it so nobody breaks breaks in and robs the place. But if I can open the door, you can't lock me in. And I know this. And then I'm tapping on the door, and a nice man with dark hair comes over to try to open the door, and he can't. And one last thing. The night before at the Four Seasons restaurant, my wife writes this note, which makes no sense. No sense. St. Bridget of Sweden, Paul, Stephen, four founders, Marcus, stuff like that. Okay. Anyway, so eventually, a nice lady with blonde hair comes over and opens the door, and we run out like scared mice. Okay. And I had a good look at her face because I'm standing at the door. And then I was telling my wife, look, we're going to the next restaurant we see. I don't care about the food. I don't know what Twilight Zone we were just in, but I need to be in the real planet Earth, okay, with people and waiters and food. I don't care what the food is, okay? So we wound up eating at the Lucky Chinese restaurant. That's the last time we had Chinese food. We don't like Chinese food, but I thought it was wonderful. Anyway, the next day I buy a book of saints. Now I believe in God. And when I turned to July 23rd, the feast day of St. Bridget of Sweden, I almost passed out because on that page is a picture of the lady with blonde hair who opened the door for us. Okay, so she may have been born in 1400 and died in 1473, but I swear to you, October 16th, 1982, she was there in Vienna. Okay, so those are the first two chapters of the book, basically word for word. So these are the things that happen. Now, the thing that's not in the book is on March 25th, 2019, the feast day of the Annunciation, the first joyous mystery of the Rosary, I'm driving to work to see patients in the office. And suddenly I don't know how to drive the car, and I don't know how to use my cell phone. I get admitted. I'm one of fewer than 500 people in world history to get this god-awful disease, Hashimoto's encephalitis. So the MRI of my brain lit up like a Christmas tree, and about 95% of my long-term memory is wiped out, and I have no short-term memory at all. So my kids came to visit, and they came for a week or so, and every day I thought it was the first time I saw them because I didn't remember that they came yesterday. And I was basically a moron now. And the other thing is I had this severe peripheral neuropathy where my feet are numb, my fingers don't work, and I had to walk with a cane, and et cetera. So I basically was in the hospital from March 25th, 2019 to May 2nd, and came home and still on, 85 milligrams of prednisone, which is a whopping dose, and chemotherapy. Get this, the chemotherapy that I was on was Cellset. It's FDA approved if you have a liver or kidney transplant to suppress your immune system so you don't reject the foreign organ. And but the only FDA approved dose is 500 milligrams twice a day, but I was treated with 1,500 milligrams twice a day for a couple of years. Anyway, after 2 years, nothing changed. I had no memory. I was a moron. And so the treatment was stopped. And then a year later, on April 29th, 2022, miraculously, my memory came back. So I still have the peripheral neuropathy, but my memory is perfect. And get this, I get an MRI of my brain every year, starting 2019. The MRI is unchanged. So it still has the parts of my brain responsible for memory that were destroyed are still destroyed, but my memory is perfect. So the book is about miracles, and now, in a way, I'm sort of like a living miracle. Again, I still have neuropathy, but the memory is perfect. Okay, I can remember I'm 1.5 years old. Okay, I'm sitting in the high chair, and I have my plastic spoons and plates and food, and I'm trying to indicate to my mother, who's in a different room, that I'm done. So I'm making noise, and I can't talk. I couldn't talk when I was 3. I certainly can't talk when I'm 1.5. So I'm making noise, and she's ignoring me. So finally, I decide to throw everything on the floor, and maybe she'll come in. And that doesn't work. So eventually, I try to stand up out of the harness to get out of the high chair, fall, slip my chin, and we wound up in the emergency room getting stitched up. This is like when I was 1.5 years. And I also remember something that happened when I was 6 months old. So this is like an amazing memory, okay? And I shouldn't have a memory to be able to speak with you if you look at the MRI of my brain. Okay, it's unchanged.
Which is a miracle in some ways, and I just want to interject here because a lot to go off in that story to begin with. But just so you know personally, I was originally brought up to believe, based on my father's side, that I'm German,
Okay.
but that changed because my father is not my biological father. I was a sperm donor baby, so I found out when I was a teenager, and after doing an ancestry test, I am actually mostly European Jewish
There you go.
ancestry.
Oh my
Ance-
God.
ance- Ancestry wise, not religion wise, but ancestry
Right.
wise.
Right.
So that's what a majority of my ancestry is European Jewish because my biological father's last name is Rosen.
There
So
you go. There you go.
we
You know,
I
there's all kinds of problems with some of that stuff. My mother-in-law, who I love, okay, um, she has blue eyes and blonde hair and high cheekbones, and she was actually born in Sweden, okay, and her parents gave her up. And when I met her, she was raised by a doctor and his wife who had dark hair and were Italian. And you know, you look at her and you say, this doesn't match, okay? And my wife, who's gorgeous, looks very much like her. You know, the blonde hair, blue eyes, high cheekbones, like she's from Sweden, also. Like you know, like some kind
which
of. My wife is one. If you look at the front cover of Sports Illustrated, I won't tell you the month, but it's 1980. Okay, I was a Plumley Fellow then. She's there. She's there in a skimpy bathing suit. She's the only one on the cover. Okay, and
mhm,
the reason is because she was very good friends with what's her name, a famous actress, um, Christy Brinkley. Okay,
oh my
Christy
God,
and Christy Brinkley had two photo shoots at the same time. Okay, so my wife pitched in, and if you look at the Sports Illustrated cover, it says Christy Brinkley in the Bahamas or whatever the heck it is. Okay, but it's not Christy Brinkley; it's my wife. And you can see pictures of Christy Brinkley's face, and my wife is much
okay,
my wife is better looking than Christy Brinkley. Okay, so
well I
it's
I I I, I will say this. I know who Christine Brinkley is as a teenager in the 2000s. I know who Christine Brinkley is, and I if your wife is better looking than her, then God bless you, sir. You are a lucky man. And
I'm a lucky man, that's for sure.
I mean, it's I have never talked about it on this podcast. I've talked about it on other podcasts, but never this podcast. But I will say, see, being that I thought I was brought up German in high school, I'm in my 30s now, but in high school, I went through a phase for maybe a month where I actually, because there's a whole thing going on in my high school at the time where I actually was almost, I could have been a neo-Nazi. I honestly could have been, but my father sat me down. My father was German. The man I called my father my whole life was German,
Right.
and he said, "Stop this bullshit." He's like, "You are not a Nazi. You never will be a Nazi." He's like, "Stop this bullshit. You are not a neo-Nazi." He's like, "You. That's not the way we raised you. That's not who you are. Just because you don't fit in with normal society, don't do this bullshit." So I immediately stopped it because I respected my father and I respected his opinion in life. So I stopped it immediately. And then to find out literally about to find out literally about 10 years later that I was actually European Jewish, like shook my world to the core. I was like,
Absolutely.
"Oh, I almost made a huge mistake in high school. I almost made a huge mistake. I could have done something with my life that would have ruined it completely." And if I found that out later in my life after I thought that way for a month or so, I could, if I actually continued down that path, I could have screwed my life up completely because I would have found out later that I actually am a European Jew by all
Yeah.
ancestry rights by my biological father because I was
Here, here's here's
because I
another here's another story. Okay, so I'm 5 or 6 years old, and after I came home, well, I'm older. I'm 8 years old. After I came home from yeshiva, my parents were still not there, and I used to go over to this lady when in first grade and second grade who lived in the same apartment building, this whole shoe, and she was very kind to me, very nice, till my parents got home. But she had no idea what children are like. She never was married, never had kids, and she had one relative, a nephew, Jerry, who I would see once in a while. And so she treated me like as a small adult. Okay, so we're coming home, and she turns the news on, and it turns out there's some neo Nazis celebrating Hitler's birthday. Okay, and I'm horrified to find out that I'm born April 20th, and the same day as Adolf Hitler's birthday. Okay, so I tell this to my mother. Okay, and of course she knows I'm born at a certain this day, and my mother came to this country. First of all, she was too young, and she was always worried that they'll find out who she is and throw her out of the country or whatever the heck it is. So she took a different birthday. She took the birthday of one of her older sisters. Okay, and just we can make up a birthday. What the heck? Okay. And so
Exactly.
she started telling me that my birthday is really April 22nd. Okay, after she found this, after I told her this, and I remember saying to her, "I know that I'm supposed to be dumb, but I may be dumb, but I know what my birthday is, and it's April 20th. It's not April 22nd." And of course, it was a bad choice on her part anyway, because April 22nd is the birthday of Lenin, another mass murderer. Okay,
Of
so
course.
it wasn't a good choice, but whatever. But I was, and the thing is, people who are older and German, they know his birthday. Okay, and there's a pharmacist now who's an older German lady, and usually when I call in the script for myself, they're asking me for my birthday. She says, "I know your birthday. Okay, it's April 20th," and it's like, okay, let me call in a time when this person's not working there. Okay, because she'll probably think I'm a Nazi or something, whatever the heck it is. So
I mean,
and again, my last name is a German word. Okay, my S-O-N. Well, forget about that part. Okay, I'm Paul Joel for this one. That's my pen name. But the real thing is it's a German word. Okay, which means sun, like sun, like the sun in the sky. And so, and then to make matters worse, so I'm in yeshiva, and it's one thing to be discriminated against because you're Jewish or you're black or you're Puerto Rican or whatever the heck it is. But how'd you like to be discriminated against because they think you're part of a group, but you're not? Okay. So
I know exactly what that's like because of that.
exactly. Okay. So here I am. I'm in yeshiva, and somehow these people think that I'm Japanese, and Japanese were not high on the list after World War II. And so why do they think that? Because I have Gilbert syndrome. It's some kind of metabolic disorder. So when I get stressed or if I get an infection, my eyes turn yellow. And if you look closely, my eyes are kind of slanted up also. So I'm being harassed because I'm Japanese when I'm not Japanese, okay? Which is like, and I'm thinking to myself, this has got to be one of the all-time lowest things, okay? Like, it's bad enough to be discriminated against if you're part of this group, but I'm not even part of that group, okay? Whatever. Anyway, so
I mean,
go ahead.
I get it. I mean, I get it. I mean, I never have been technically discriminated against, I'll say, but I mean, I'll go into it a little bit. In my high school, I had two friends from my neighborhood who literally had the crap beaten out of them because they made fun of some African American kids and they got the crap beaten out of them. This radio DJ from New Jersey, Hal Turner, got involved and started making comments about it and even called one of the victims' wives. I mean, mothers. Called one of the victims' mothers. And
Well,
she didn't know who Hal Turner was. For those who don't know, Hal Turner was, or I don't know if he's still active, but he was and possibly is a Nazi. He's a neo-Nazi radio DJ out of New Jersey, and
oh
he
God.
came up. He came up to my school. Literally, he came up to my high school with his followers and did a protest in front of our school on a Saturday. And I was literally questioned by teachers I was close to if I was going to be at this protest with him. And I'm like, I have never heard of this man. I've heard some of his recordings, where he calls African Americans certain species of monkeys and whatnot. But I have never been affiliated with this man. I have nothing to do with this man. I want nothing to do with this man. I don't have hate towards any race or gender or creed. It's not my prerogatory in life to do that. I was just trying to live my life. I was a high schooler. I was an unpopular high schooler. I was just trying to live my life and get through high school. Like I didn't give a shit. I didn't give a shit. I didn't give a shit about Hal Turner or whatever the hell he believed in. But so I mean, that was my high school dilemma. That was the worst thing that happened to me in high school. Was I was accused of being a white supremacist when I was not, because I literally was spending the day that protest happened. I was spending the day with an African American female. So, I mean, is there any better way to really protest it than that? I don't think so. But I mean, I just, as somebody who was raised German, though, because my family is German to some degree. My father's, the man I call my father, his grandmother's maiden name was Hanweber, which is a German name, and I thought I was German until I was in my late 20s. I thought I was German, and I looked at that with some pride because German people have great food, they have great holidays.
Are you kidding me? They have an incredible performance in math and science. Are you kidding me?
They do.
You heard an EKG? Okay, that was invented by Germans. Eindhoven.
I mean, Germans have a lot of great things to their names. I'm not going to deny that. Right. But to find out that in my late 20s I wasn't German, that I was actually Jewish by ancestry, was oh my God, it was a slap in the face, if anything. I mean, it was just not even a slap in the face. It was just a shock. I'm European Jewish by most of my ancestry. I'm European Jewish. Like, it was like 52% or something like that. Like, it was just, I mean, apparently I'm Arab a little bit, like 5%, but I was mainly European Jewish, and it shocked me to my core. And I was like, okay. I mean, I'm not a religious man by any means. I'm agnostic, if anything. I'm spiritual now, but I was agnostic back then. Since starting this podcast, I became more spiritual, and I embrace spirituality. I have practiced Reiki. I have practiced meditation. I have practiced all these spiritual means. I don't believe in any particular religion because I think religions just want money. So I don't like to prescribe to any religion because of that.
One of the criticisms of religion, and this is what I felt before I believed in God suddenly, is that especially my wife is Catholic, okay, and when you look at the policies of the Catholic Church and the Pope and the Vatican and everything else, what has the Vatican done that was different from the Nazis? I mean, how many Jews have the Vatican's killed? Have crusades and murders, and how many pogroms were there started by Catholics, throughout history? Okay,
a lot.
They don't have a clean history. Okay, so to me it looked like the policies of the Vatican were similar to any secular country. Okay, they want land, they want this, they want that, they want power, and that's what it's all about. Okay, forget about helping your neighbor. Okay, this is what this is really about. And to go to quote unquote have the Crusades to kill people to conquer back the Holy Land is not quite biblical.
It's not.
Okay,
it's really not.
Okay, so whatever.
I mean, it's funny because I used to do another paranormal podcast that was more of a discussion podcast with some co-hosts, and my co-host Scott and I used to always say, if the apocalypse happens, the first place we're going is the Vatican, because we want to go into their basement and see all the texts they have hidden there, and find out all the secret history of Earth.
Well, again, it's a long history. Some of it wonderful, and some of it not so wonderful.
It is, but I mean, there's extraterrestrial history hidden in there. There's secret religious history hidden in there. There's so much history in the basement of the Vatican, because their library in the basement is miles long. from what legend tells.
Yeah.
So I would love to go to the Vatican if the apocalypse ever happens and just read all their history of what happened on Earth.
That'd be an incredible education, that's for sure.
It would be, and that's why we always said it, because it would be incredible. But let's focus on you, not the Vatican, because
Okay.
this is not about the Vatican.
No, it's not.
So your memory disappeared basically, and then came back stronger than it ever was, which to me is a miracle by some standards. It's a miracle. It's unheard of. I mean, it's almost unheard of.
And it's also
People,
it's not like I started new medicine. I was off all medicines for a year. And now get this. Here's one last thing. I'm very close to my wife is the oldest of nine. She has four brothers and four sisters. But there's one sister particularly and her husband that I'm closest to. He's like the brother I never had, and she's closest to me. And I'm closer to her than anyone else. And so here I am. I'm admitted to the hospital on March 25th, 2019. And I finally get home on May 2nd, 2019. So I'm in the hospital for over a month. And that's um, my brother-in-law's birthday. Okay. And then the day that my memory comes back, which is April 29th, 2022, that's his wife's birthday. Okay. So there's always some connection, whether it makes any sense or doesn't make any sense. But, if you're going to have two kind of terrific days, why are they related like that?
see, it does have a connection. It does. That is what we call synchronicity.
Okay.
And the fact that you're close to that sister-in-law more than anybody else in that family, that's a synchronicity. And April 29th, is it not a day that only shows up every 4 years or so in a leap year? If I'm not mistaken.
No, you're talking about February 29th.
Maybe I am. Sorry, listeners.
Okay, right.
That's a brain fart on my part.
That's if my memory if my memory is correct. No, it's February 29th. Every 4 years.
I believe you are right, but I mean,
Yes.
still April 29th. I mean,
Right.
that's
Still, there's a connection.
it's synchronicity. I mean,
right.
it is, because synchronicity tends to happen because of reasons. I mean, I can't even name all the reasons that synchronicity will happen. Synchronicity is a very true thing in this earth, and I mean, it's kind of like, I was talking to a guest a couple months ago, and they mentioned a certain extraterrestrial species. And the same day, I released a podcast with the first person who ever told me about that extraterrestrial species.
Oh wow!
That's synchronicity. I couldn't have planned that happening. There's no way in heaven and hell and anything I could have predicted that happening. Like, I wouldn't have known that. Like, it's just synchronicity exists, and things happen for a reason on certain times and dates, because synchronicity, it really does exist, and it's scary. It's scary that the fates that fate would have us have things happen on certain reasons. But go ahead. I mean,
I got to tell you one other story that's interesting. Okay, so I'm emaciated all my life. Okay, I'm on my selective service card at age 18. I'm 6'1", 150 pounds. Okay, and again, I was starving most of my life anyway. And I played in high school and the first year or so in college in this two-hand touch league on cement at the this housing project. Okay, I'll leave the name out. And I realized I had a talent catching the football. So when I finished the last 2 years of college, I decided, let's try out. Okay, so I spent 2 years lifting weights, eating like a pig, and went to 215 pounds. Looked like some kind of muscle freak with an 18.5-inch neck and biceps and everything else. And then I went to the Bridgeport Jets, which was the farm team of the New York Jets, who had just won the Super Bowl that year. It was 1970. They won the 69 Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And they had like about 125 men there, and they took 6 of us to the training camp. And I was one of the 6. So I'm in training camp, and I'm doing really well, okay? And I had already been admitted to medical school, but, I figured I can go to medical school anyway. I want to play. And so it's kind of funny because I had never played tackle football, so I didn't, I'm picking out a helmet, And a wide receiver usually has a helmet with two prongs in the front. And I pick out a lineman's helmet, like with a full mask. And the equipment manager says, hey, obviously I'm not a lineman. I'm not 275 pounds or 215 pounds. And he says, you got the wrong helmet. And I said, no, this is the helmet I want. I want to keep the features of my face the way they are. And I also used to use the metal of that to block with. Anyway, I was doing really well, and then I hurt my knee, and it kept subluxating, which means I'd run down the field, plant it, and be on the floor untouched.
Yep.
Well, so I got cut, and the head coach and the offensive coordinator said, "Get your knee fixed. You would have made this team." Okay, so I went to medical school the first year, and then in the summer between my first and second year, I had knee surgery. And I woke up, and I wanted to be a football player, and I also wanted to be an orthopedist, okay, at the time. And I woke up, and I complained that the cast was too tight. And the orthopedist said, no, it's got to be snug, it's fine. And the next thing, I woke up about 10 hours later in the middle of the night, an orthopedic resident sawed open the cast, and my foot was paralyzed and numb, and the same with the leg, and it was pressing on the nerve. And that was the end of football, and that was the end of being an orthopedist. And I was basically on crutches until the summer of the following year. And, it's a horrendous situation. Okay, it was the first time I was ever sick, but it made me a much better physician. Okay, and I might have a 15-minute office visit scheduled with the patient, and there may be like 25 complaints that they're going to tell me about, and maybe 3 or 4 of them are legitimate. But I'm going to listen to all 25. I'm not going to miss anything. And I've never been sued, never had a malpractice case. And so terrible things happen, but sometimes there's a lot of benefit for it. I mean, I was crushed at the time, but it turned out it was a good thing in a way.
Exactly. I forgot about this completely, but you said you went to you said you were working at Mass General originally.
Yes.
It's funny, synchronicities and all that.
That's where I met my wife.
Synchronicities and all that. I actually live in Massachusetts.
Okay, so you know about Mass General. It's a great hospital.
I can't say I've ever been there in Boston. Thank God. I mean, thank God. I don't need to go there. But I mean, I do live in Massachusetts.
It's one of the most prestigious hospitals in the world.
Oh,
you have patients from all around the world who come there. Okay.
Don't get me wrong. I believe it. I mean, Boston has a lot of great medical facilities, and
yes,
I 100% believe it. I mean, I live in north central Massachusetts, so I'm a good hour and a half, 2 hours out of Boston. But it's just funny that's where you went. That's where you studied to be a doctor, and I live in Massachusetts. Like I found the synchronicity.
That's where I did my training in pulmonary. I'm board certified in pulmonary. I'm board certified in internal medicine. So
I found that ironic because I live in Massachusetts. And,
well, there's a connection there.
I mean, I'm originally from New York, but I live in Massachusetts since 2016. So, but
well, I grew up in Brooklyn. Okay, and
exactly.
Right in the front of the book, it has the definition of love from 1 Corinthians 13 by St. Paul. Love is patient, love is kind, it always perseveres. Okay, but in the back of the book, it has a picture of a baseball batter, and the baseball batter is like us. He comes to the plate hoping to get a hit, and more often than not, he makes an out. And it's kind of like us sinners. We try to do good, but unfortunately, we sin, and we kind of have to not give up and wait for the next time at bat to try again. Okay, keep trying. Don't give up.
I love that because it's funny because I mean I'm from Kingston, New York. I don't know if you know where Kingston, New York is.
I know where Kingston, New York is because I used to work in Ellenville, New York. At the summers at the Brookland Hotel. Okay. I see Neville, but I worked at the Brookland Hotel as a busboy and a waiter.
Okay, see, Ellenville, New York?
Yes.
I was raised in Tilston, New York. I doubt you know that name.
No.
But it's a small little town between Rosendale, New Paltz, and Kingston.
New Paltz, I heard of.
It's in between Kingston and New Paltz, but that's where I grew up. It's Tilston, New York. It's in between New Paltz and Kingston, New York, and that's where I grew up. I mean, that's funny that that Ellenville. I went to college at Sullivan County Community College, and I used to drive through Ellenville every weekend to go back and forth between home and college.
Oh wow.
So I know Ellenville very well.
Yeah, the
But
hotel was on Ulster Heights Road, the
I
Brooklyn
know
Heights.
I know Ellenville very well. But I know I never been to the hospital, but I know that whole area very well. At least I did. I don't anymore because I unfortunately I rarely get a chance to go back to New York anymore since I live in Massachusetts. But my my grandmother still lives in Kingston, and God love her. But she still lives in Kingston, but nobody else in my family lives in New York anymore besides my grandmother and my aunt. But I went to Sullivan County Community College and Ulster County Community College, so I drove
Oh,
back and
so there
forth.
you go. There you go.
I drove back and forth between New York and between those two colleges multiple times, and it's just funny that you know that area. You know that area. That's the synchronicity for me. That's the synchronicity that you know that area, and it's just funny because
My
the people.
my older son graduated from Cornell. My younger
Oh,
son,
I know.
my younger son graduated from Columbia,
I
and
know both. I know both.
they're like my wife. They're good looking, brilliant, hardworking, perfect kind of perfect
I
people.
I know both those colleges to some degree. I never been to either one, but I know both those colleges to some degree. So 'cause I looked at all those colleges when I was looking at colleges originally in high school, but I ended up going to community college just because it seemed like the cheapest, simplest option for my parents at the time. But it's funny that you are from the same kind of area, kind of in a way. But let me before we get to the end here, let's talk about your book because I want to be able to share your book out with my listeners, and I feel like it would be a great advantage for them all to know about it.
Okay, well, again, the first two chapters I already told you about. It's I walk into Tears Church and suddenly I believe in God. I get this message. And then in the second chapter, I'm in Vienna trapped in this hallway. But the book is basically about the request of Our Lady of Fatima in 1917. On October 13th, 1917, she asked the three shepherd children to go to the Pope and have him consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart in unison with the bishops. Okay? And two popes actually tried to do that, Pope Paul and Pope John Paul II, the Polish Pope, but they never did it as requested with the bishops. And in the book, I'm tasked with getting that done. And in real life, I feel like I'm supposed to get that done. In the book, I'm supposed to get that done to avert a nuclear holocaust. And the beautiful blonde, first the CIA finds out about this, and they send two goons to follow me and make sure I'm safe, that nothing happens to me, and I get very nervous. And then instead, they send this beautiful blonde. Okay, and I said to them, "Well, what's she going to do?" He says, "Well, she's trained, and she could walk closer to you. She'll be your girlfriend. Put her arm around you. Okay, she'll be better than these two. Plus, you're freaking out with these two, thugs." So she's assigned to make sure that I get to this consecration. Okay, that I'm safe and get there. Okay, and the stress gets too much for me. Okay, and I freak out and I say, I'm not going. I want to go home to Boston. We lived in Boston at that time. Okay. I want to go home and see a Red Sox game. Okay. And she's like completely starts screaming at me. And she hates me in that part of, in this book anyway. And she doesn't believe in God. And she thinks it's ridiculous for them to protect a moron like me who supposedly does believe in God. And it's all nonsense. And so that's part of this. So finally, I say, I want to go home. I want to see a Red Sox game. Okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And she says to me, look, just be a good boy. Do what you're told. Go to this consecration. Okay. If you do that, we'll buy you the Red Sox. Okay, you can go to a game anytime you want. Okay, we'll buy you the whole goddamn team. Okay, and so whatever. I don't want to tell the whole ending, but that's
Oh, please
basically
don't.
what this
Uh,
is about. Okay, it's about the request for the consecration of Russia to avert a nuclear holocaust. And we have arguments all the time. And I think I'm supposed to do that, get this done in real life. And she keeps telling me, you don't even have burial insurance. Like, what happens if you die? Okay, and I keep telling her, if I die before this consecration happens, the next day after I die, there's going to be a nuclear holocaust. All the, man made these weapons of mass destruction, and the evil one is going to come and set them off. Okay, so there'll be nobody to bury me. Okay, so I don't need burial insurance. Then we argue about that too. Okay, I mean, I'm
I,
the character in the book, and she's the other character in the book. Okay, it's
I
just
I love that. I freaking love that. So
and
since
and,
we are at the end,
and the other thing, we always keep arguing, and I could write the dialogue for the arguments in my sleep. Okay, because it's the same thing. We'll argue about something, and then afterwards, she has to win the argument. So there's always an attack on my manhood. Okay, as part of this. Okay, so I'll hear things like, "You look like a man. You have hair on your chest. Act like a man." It ends. It ends with that. Okay. She always has to get the last word in. It's always an attack on my masculinity.
well, I mean, that's that's marriage, plain and simple. Plain and simple. That's marriage. But since we are since we are nearing the end of the episode, tell my listeners where they where they can find your book,
Okay.
where they can find you,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
basically
Right.
promote yourself.
Okay. First off, there's a website that I have. It's www. Dot / pauljoelbook.com. Okay, / and on the website you can order the book, but please go to the website and read the review of the book by Stacy Cellini. She's an Amazon book reviewer, and it tells everything about the book. You can also order it on Amazon, and it's also available at Barnes and Noble. You just print in "A Man Like You and Me: A Supernatural Adventure Story" by Paul Joel, and the book comes up, and you can order it from anywhere in the world.
Well, there you go, folks. I mean, I've read Stacy's interview of his book, and it is pretty incredible. I actually am looking forward to reading his book. I really am.
Well, again,
It,
my email address for anyone who wants to get a hold of me is sreviews@msn.com, SREVIEWS@msn.com. And if you buy the book and read it, if you like it, I want to know about it. If you hate it, I want to know about it. Just send me a message. That's the only way I can learn, getting feedback.
there you go, folks. An author who wants your honest opinion. That's hard to find nowadays. So, it really is. It's hard to find nowadays. So, there you go. For all my listeners who don't know, you know where to find me. If you don't by now, shame on all you. But you don't know where to find me. Check the outro. It'll all be in there when this episode releases. But until then, oh, Jesus. Sorry, I got hiccups tonight. I don't know why. If you want to, I want to thank Paul for coming on because it's been amazing. It's been, oh, Jesus Christ, these hiccups are annoying as shit. But it's been an amazing episode. And until next time, folks, I'll be back next week with more interviews, of course. But until next time, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. And be sure to come back next time. And be sure to check out Paul's book. It sounds incredible. It really sounds incredible. Almost like a James Bond novel types in a way. But until next time, I want to thank Paul for coming on. And have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Is there any way you could send me a copy of this interview at some point to my email address, sreviews@msn.com?
You can find me on Facebook as Jeremy Bryant, or you can find me as Uncensored, Unapologetic, and Untamed UQ Podcast Collective Facebook group. You can find me on Twitter and the Instagram as @JugglerBastard, or should I say X now. And you can find me on TikTok as @JugglerBastard Podcast. You can also find me on YouTube as Paranormal The New Normal. And you can also find me streaming on YouTube as Blind Knowledge Network, because all knowledge is blind until they admit Bigfoot exists.